Right now, somewhere inside your chest, there's a switch that's older than your legs, older than your lungs, in a way that actually makes sense once you hear it. It fires off at random, it makes you jump, it embarrasses you in meetings, and scientists still don't fully agree on why it exists. I'm talking about hiccups, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand something about your own body that sounds almost too strange to be true. Every single hiccup you've ever had might be a leftover instruction from an animal that didn't have lungs yet. Picture the scene. Somewhere around a fire, thousands of years ago, a man suddenly stops mid-sentence. Hic. Everyone around him laughs. Someone throws a joke. Someone else tells him to hold his breath. This moment has happened almost exactly like this in every single human gathering in every era on every continent for as long as our species has existed. Nobody in that camp had any idea what was actually happening inside his body. They just knew it was strange, harmless, and endlessly annoying. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Modern science, with all its scanners and labs, still doesn't have one clean, fully agreed upon answer either. So what actually is a hiccup? Where does it come from? And why has it survived completely unchanged in every human body for our entire existence as a species? The answer takes us somewhere you would never expect, into the water, long before humans existed at all. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Stay with me, because the next part connects your chest right now to an animal you'd never guess. A hiccup happens in two fast, almost violent steps. First, the muscles you use to breathe, your diaphragm, your chest, and your neck, all contract sharply all at once. Then, immediately after, your glottis, the small flap at the back of your throat, slams shut. That sudden slamming shut is exactly what makes the hic sound. Now, here's the strange part. Scientists studying this exact pattern, sharp inhale followed by a sudden closing of the throat, found something remarkable. It's almost identical to how tadpoles breathe through their gills. When a tadpole pumps water across its gills, it has to solve a very specific problem. How do you let water in to breathe without flooding your developing lungs? The answer tadpoles evolved was to sharply contract their breathing muscles, then snap the glottis shut at exactly the right moment, keeping water into the lung tissue growing inside them. That is, almost move for move, the same physical sequence as your hiccup. The theory researchers have proposed is that the signal controlling this entire sequence starts in your brainstem, and your brainstem is one of the oldest, least changed parts of your entire nervous system. It's the same structure that in amphibians controls gill breathing, which means, in a very real sense, your brainstem was once an amphibian brainstem. It's been modified, expanded, layered over by millions of years of evolution, but never fully replaced, and every so often it seems to reach back and fire off that old primitive program anyway. You're not imagining a wild theory here. This idea comes from real peer-reviewed research, first laid out clearly in a well-known 2003 study, and it remains the leading explanation scientists still point to today. But here's what almost nobody tells you next, and it might be the most unsettling part of this entire story. You didn't start hiccuping after birth. You started in the womb. Human fetuses begin hiccuping before their bodies have even finished building the neural circuitry needed for normal breathing. Read that again. The wiring for hiccups exists and activates before the wiring for actual regular breathing is complete. Think about how strange that is. Your body builds a malfunction before it builds the system it's supposedly malfunctioning in. That timing is one of the biggest reasons scientists don't buy the idea that hiccups are simply an error, a glitch, or a sign that something's gone wrong neurologically. If hiccups were purely a mistake, you'd expect them in damaged or unusual nervous systems. Instead, they show up like clockwork in every healthy fetus, every healthy newborn, every healthy adult across the entire species without exception. And newborns hiccup a lot, not occasionally, constantly. Some studies suggest infants spend roughly 2.5% of their entire time hiccuping. For something evolution supposedly left behind, that is an enormous amount of active use. So if it's not a mistake, what's it actually doing? This is where one researcher's experiment gets genuinely fascinating, because she looked directly inside a hiccuping baby's brain to find out. A researcher named Kimberly Whitehead, working at University College London, had a theory that hiccups weren't leftover noise at all. She proposed they might actually be doing something useful, helping a developing baby's brain literally map out its own body. Before you're born, your brain doesn't automatically know where your diaphragm is or how to consciously control it. Somehow, it has to learn. Whitehead's theory suggests hiccups might be one of the tools your body uses to teach itself that lesson early in the days, a kind of internal rehearsal for breathing, run before the real performance ever begins. To test this, she attached EEG electrodes to a group of babies, some born early, some a few months old, and recorded their brain activity during episodes of hiccupping. What she found was striking. The exact region of the brain's cortex connected to the chest, the area responsible for the lungs and diaphragm, lit up every single time a hiccup occurred, not randomly, not vaguely, specifically, precisely, tied to that one physical location in the body. In other words, every hiccup might be quietly sending a signal straight to the part of your brain that needs to learn exactly where your breathing muscles are and how to control them before you ever take your first real breath outside the womb. That single finding flips the entire story. A hiccup isn't just an old glitch rattling around in your brainstem. It might be your body's own training exercise running on a loop that started before you were even born. And there's one more theory, one that connects hiccups to something every single person alive once needed to survive their first few days. Here's a separate but related idea, proposed by researcher Christian Strauss. He suggested that the exact neural pathway responsible for hiccups might also help newborns learn to suckle. Think about what feeding actually requires from a newborn's body: fast, repeated cheek and mouth movements, precise timing, and critically, a glottis that knows exactly when to snap shut so milk goes down into the stomach instead of into the lungs. That is an oddly familiar list: rapid muscle contraction, sudden glottis shut, precise timing between the two. It's almost the exact same physical toolkit a hiccup uses. Strauss's theory suggests these two systems may not be a coincidence at all, that the hiccup reflex might double as a kind of practice run for the exact muscle coordination a newborn needs to safely feed immediately after birth. Now here's the twist almost nobody expects, because not every scientist agrees with any of this. There's another strange detail that supports the ancient leftover idea. The main nerve responsible for triggering a hiccup, called the phrenic nerve, takes an oddly long, winding route through your body on its way to your diaphragm. It's a path that makes very little sense for a land-dwelling mammal, but makes far more sense as a leftover route from a fish-like ancestor, before the diaphragm had even moved to its current position in the body. But here's the honest and important part of this story. Not everyone accepts the amphibian ancestor explanation. There's a competing theory, sometimes called the burping hypothesis, which frames hiccups less as ancient gill breathing and more as a mechanism related to burping and clearing air from the stomach. Some researchers push back hard against the fish and amphibian story altogether, arguing it's an appealing narrative that outruns the actual evidence. The truth is, after more than 2 decades of research, hiccups remain, in large part, a genuine scientific mystery. We have strong theories, we have strange, compelling evidence, we do not have complete universal agreement, which, honestly, might be the most fascinating part of this entire topic. This is something every single human being has experienced repeatedly since before birth, and science still hasn't fully closed the case. So the next time a hiccup hits you in the middle of a sentence, in a meeting, on a date, at the worst possible moment, try just for a second to feel what's actually happening. That's not randomness. That's not your body glitching for no reason. That is quite possibly a nervous system reaching backward through hundreds of millions of years, running a subroutine older than lungs, older than legs, older than the moment your ancestors first crawled out of the water at all. Every hiccup is a small, involuntary reminder that your body remembers things your mind never learned. You didn't invent that reflex. You inherited it from something that breathed through gills long before it ever breathed through lungs. If this connected some dots you never expected, subscribe, because next time we're going somewhere even stranger. What's actually happening inside your body the very first time you fall asleep?